Back with Dr. Colin Ross from the Ross Institute. And Dr. Ross, we still have you on the line here?
I'm here, yeah.
All right, great. Thanks for sticking around with us tonight to deliver this information. It's really important that people understand some of these things. So,
thanks for the forum. Well, actually, since we're kind of in the middle here, I'd like, every time I talk on this subject, I'd like to make one point, which is about my kind of overall political position on this.
Okay.
Which is actually, I think, a slightly disappointing political position to some people. But my point is that I'm not in any way against the military, against the CIA, against the government. And my personal position is, if this is speaking as somebody who grew up as Canadian, now has U.S. and Canadian dual citizenship.
Okay.
If it wasn't for the U.S. military and the CIA, we would have lost the Cold War. If we lost the Cold War, the Soviet Union would have taken over North America, and I would have died in Gulag a long time ago.
Along with me and many others.
So there's no question that I personally owe a large debt to the U.S. military and the CIA. And we have to have an intelligence community, and the intelligence community's got to do stuff in secret, and some of the stuff it's got to do is a little unsavory, but that's the way it is.
Right.
That's my political position. That doesn't mean they can just get away with anything and everything without any oversight or ever any consequences. But I bring it back to the doctors. Because what I see is not really, I'm not against the national security oath. I think the problem is there's a big conflict between the national security oath and the Hippocratic oath.
Maybe you could explain what both of those oaths sort of say in general and how they do conflict.
Well, basically, when you take a security oath at any level of military or intelligence, you agree that you are not going to talk about classified stuff. And if you do, you're subject to prosecution.
Okay.
And that's a legally binding oath that you take, and then obviously the military can't function without that. So the national security oath is designed to protect freedom and democracy. We've got to have it, and it's a good thing. But if you're a psychiatrist or if you're a psychologist, you agree to follow, in the case of a psychiatrist, medical ethics, going back to Hippocrates. And that includes things like, first do no harm, put the patient first, for real informed consent, not pretend informed consent, proper experimental procedures, not doing wild, crazy treatments, not harming people just for your own interest or for the interest of the military or the state. That's medical ethics. And what happens when these people go into mind control contracting is all of a sudden the medical ethics go out the window.
Yeah, completely out the window.
And what I think where the control should be is the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association need to get real about all this instead of just pretending it never happened. Have some committees, have some public hearings, set up some tight rules that have teeth and guidelines, and it needs to be a formal decreed violation of medical ethics. It needs to be malpractice, and you need to be at risk of having your license revoked and having a large civil suit if you take money from any intelligence agency, the military, or any covert source.
Right, a private corporation, whatever.
Private corporation, any front organization, it doesn't matter, and you don't disclose to the research subject who's funding the research and what its purpose is.
Okay.
And I think the problem that's happened historically is a lot of this was, in the MK Ultra era, was contracted into the academia. And I don't really know this, I kind of a little bit know it, but what I speculate is that it's really been taken out of academia since the mid-'70s, and it's really now funded into private corporations. So the mind control experimentation, non-lethal weapons development, general defense contracting, it's mostly private sector now.
Right.
There's still psychiatrists in there and psychologists in there and doctors, because you can't do experiments on military ways of controlling people's minds and behavior without having psychiatrists and doctors involved.
Right.
And those people are violating basic medical ethics. And that's a problem. And it's a big public problem. And it's a disgrace to medicine, and it's a disgrace to a so-called advanced modern country.
Gosh, you're not kidding. It's the whole elephant in the living room sort of idea,
Yeah, and it is elephant in the living room because, like I said, it's just sitting there on the shelves at the medical library.
Right.
It's not secret.
Right.
And many people who are still alive, who are still practicing, have been directly involved personally. Their teachers have been involved, and everybody just looks the other way.
Well, I'll tell you something on a personal note. There are a couple of things. First of all, I have a friend, a longtime friend, who I went to high school with, and I'm still very close friends with today, and we've been knowing each other for 25 years. He's a professor at Harvard. Mm-hmm. He teaches. He's a doctor at Harvard, and he went to Harvard, graduated. Was did very well there, and now he is continuing his career there as a teacher, and I certainly respect him as such. But he's going to get a copy of this interview. I can tell you that much, and because this is very serious stuff, and it has to be reconciled. And I'm
actually, a lot of it's been done at Harvard within the last 50 years.
Right, and that's the main reason why why I want to make sure that he's aware of that, if nothing else. You know what I mean? I don't particularly expect him to take action or whatever, but I just want to make sure he knows. And it's crazy that so many people in the medical community have no idea about most of this stuff.
But you can kind of let like the average doctor or average psychiatrist off the hook for not knowing about it,
mm-hmm.
but not really, because I didn't know about it. It's not hard to find out about.
Right. I'm not a physician. I found out about it. Through certainly we all have our ways. We all kind of stumble across things, and if we follow them, they sort of lead us on our path. But this is one that I have a close friend who was born congenitally with a congenital defect because his mother was subjected to radiation experiments in Utah in the late 1940s.
You mentioned that when we were talking before at Dugway Proving Ground.
Yeah, Dugway. And
Dugway Proving Ground was a site of a lot of radiation, also LSD and biological weapons experiments.
Yeah, and as soon as I found out about that, I started just doing a little bit of research on my own to find out what had happened to him. And sure enough, it led me down the road, and now here I am talking to you. So,
well, and that's just one little section of what went on.
Right.
I mean, if you look at that's radiation, but let's just look at drugs and mind control experimentation.
Let's do that. Let's talk about LSD a little bit maybe, and then let's get into the serious mind control stuff and what they were really doing and how they did it and how effective it was and all that stuff.
Well, the LSD story is one of the most amazing stories, which, again, I didn't know anything about it when I got into it. I knew about LSD.
You're right. It is an incredible story, and I look forward to hearing you tell it.
I'm in my psychiatry training from 1981 to 1985. So the main diagnostic manual was the DSM-3, which came out in 1980.
Okay.
It gets updated every once in a while.
You're up in Canada at this time, or you're down here? Okay.
And Canada really uses the DSM.
All right.
So that's basically the rule book for how you make psychiatric diagnoses. And then there's a new edition in 87, 94, and 2000.
Okay.
So the current one is DSM-4.
All right.
Which just means the 4th edition of this manual. And according to the rules of the American Psychiatric Association, if you're on LSD, you have a mental disorder. You're mentally ill while you're on the trip. It's officially defined that way.
Okay.
And, I mean, if you take a whole lot of it, you have a substance abuse problem. And LSD intoxication is a psychotic deranged mental state, basically. Okay, well, so that's what I was taught. And nobody debated this. You didn't see professors stand up and say, yeah, but I took a lot of trips when I was a teenager and I'm okay.
Right.
It was this unanimous, and of course, lots of psychiatrists who are in their 50s and 60s now experimented with acid in the 60s.
Sure.
Personally.
Sure.
But everybody, don't talk about that. And
in fact, some incredible research came out of that, and a lot of that got swept under the rug too.
Exactly. So then, while I'm reading all of this, I end up finding out the actual history of LSD, which again is completely public domain information. There's books on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's at the medical school library. It's not secret.